بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is our fifth and final session for these parenting workshops that we've been doing. The other four are available online on the MCC's Facebook page and on their YouTube page. You can access those, inshallah, just by going, I think, to the left bar videos, and there's a whole library, actually, of all their videos there. So if you wanted to kind of catch up, you can watch those there. So I usually start out with going over the last session, just doing a quick review, because I want everybody to follow along from what was discussed in the previous sessions. So we'll just go through a review and then we'll talk about today's session, inshallah. And just for those of you who are new here, I really want audience participation and engagement. So if you have questions at any point, comments, please feel free to jump in. It's supposed to be a dialogue, so inshallah. With that said, we started off, actually, sorry, the outline here, we talked last time about leadership basics in Islam. That's actually been something we've been talking about from the beginning, from the very first session and on. I keep reminding people of that because we referenced that. But then we specifically talked about identifying risks and dangers in terms of, parenting and what potential problems we might come across as parents with our kids. So we really focused on that for the last session. So just to review the leadership basics, we talked about the importance, first and foremost, of parents knowing themselves well. Parenting often, I think, is understood as a focus on the child's behavior, and that's where people usually concentrate. But you actually really do have to start with yourself, and that's a constant theme that we've brought up time and time again in these sessions. The importance of parents to do exactly what we're doing here, which is really talking about first, what we need to do for ourselves in order to be effective in our parenting style. So we have to understand ourselves well, understand our own needs. Then you understand the needs or those in your care and the needs of those in your care. So you have to understand your children. You have to understand your spouse. You have to understand everybody in your household and their needs. That's the starting point. Then you have to understand, obviously, the potential dangers and threats, and then take preventative measures, right, of how to protect your household. And you have to also know when to seek counsel. Okay, this is a big problem in our community. Unfortunately, a lot of people, they suffer in silence, and they often tend to try to figure things out on their own. And sometimes the problem just gets too big for them, and then they are overwhelmed, and it's almost like major damage control where they're trying to reach out at that point to someone, and sometimes it really is too far. And so you have to really know when to seek counsel, and then of course to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to submit to His will. These are the things that every parent needs if they want to be effective. We talked, especially this last point, a lot throughout the series about the mindset, which we'll get to inshallah soon, about submitting to the fact that we cannot control outcomes. We just simply cannot. And if you start off your parenting with that mindset really clear, it's a lot healthier than thinking that by your good intentions and all of your good efforts and everything that you do, you can control what's going to happen in your household and with your children. This is not correct. We just simply can't control that. And there's plenty of examples in history of prophets, of saints, of people who obviously put in every effort to do the best by their children, but their children turned out not like the way they wanted to. So we have to accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who determines outcomes. So all we have to focus on is what we can control, which are our actions and our reactions. Those are the two things that if we focus on, inshallah, it will make for more effective parenting. Okay, so the dangers and threats that we identified last time, we'll just go ahead and jump right into it, are from a spiritual angle. Obviously, we're going to approach it first from there because that is the most fundamental place to start from. Shaitan and nafs, these are two threats that every single one of us, not just our children, have to face every single day. And we have to be very well versed in what what those mean. What does it mean to have shaitan as a threat or your nafs as a threat? So this language we have to introduce into our households, as soon as possible, or when the age, when it's appropriate. Young children should not be, introduced to concepts of shaitan or hellfire. Those things it's not ready when they're 2-3 years old. You don't need to scare children into obedience, or don't. That's a real big mistake, unfortunately, that I've seen in a lot of examples. So, but you do want to introduce that concept when it's time and really identify how shaitan works, right? How does he threaten us? What are his what powers does he have, and where are his limitations? And then your own nafs. To be able to distinguish, for example, what is something that shaitan inspires versus something that the nafs inspires. This is a big thing that a lot of people don't know, because we are very easy on ourselves, right? We often scapegoat shaitan for pretty much everything, right? When we falter and we make mistakes, it's like, shaitan made me do it. And children can sometimes fall into that trap too. But we have to be able to distinguish what is something that you can legitimately say, okay, it was definitely waswasa and you fell into a trap, or it was your own nafs. Who knows? What's the answer? How do you distinguish what's a shaitanic thought or shaitanic inspired action, and what emanates from your own weak, bad habits and nafs? How do you distinguish? Anybody know? Very good. MashaAllah. Yes. And then shaitan is the opposite, right? So your nafs, it habituates to bad behavior. So if you've been doing the same thing over and over again, you cannot blame shaitan for that, right? Years you've been falling into the same pattern, pathology of behavior, you can't blame shaitan. But whenever you escalate in something, like you do something that's worse than you've done before, then that was likely one of the traps, right, that you fell into. So it's important to know that and to teach your children that, and we'll get to a few more specifics. But then another, bad company. This is a big issue that we as parents have to feel really confident and solid about, in terms of making sure that our children have good company. I think there's this attitude, and maybe it's a Western thing, about, especially when your children get to the teenage years, a lot of parents worry so much about losing their children that they want to be their best friend and let them do everything and anything. And that often includes allowing their children to have friends who are, maybe not the best company, because they're afraid that, if I put too many boundaries or conditions, that I'm going to get resentment back, and maybe, there will cause problems. But if you start from a very early age monitoring and being very well aware who your children's influencers are, it's going to help you. And why I say that is because parents need to understand, prior to the adolescent age, we have the most influence over our children. Generally speaking, parents are the main influencers. But as soon as they hit the adolescent age, it completely switches. And friends actually end up having a lot more influence over children. So if you're not, if you have no idea who they talk to at school, because you drop them off and you pick them up, and they, usually with children anyway, especially when they hit those preteen years, they don't really offer a lot of information, right? You ask them a question and it's like one word response. So if you're just kind of like, okay, well, I guess that's all I'm going to get, and you let it go from that perspective, and you have no clue who they spend their time with at school. I mean, we're talking about 8 hours sometimes. And if they have after school programs, maybe 10 hours of their day, who are they spending it with? And what are they teaching them? What are they learning from them? Are they exposing them to things that you don't want them exposed to? And a lot of times, especially now with these devices, this is very common. Children learn a lot from this. And I think, I did a workshop yesterday too, but I was mentioning that I truly believe this is more dangerous than a vehicle. Okay. And if we consider how much preparation we take to, get our kids behind a wheel, and how much effort we get them, trained to make sure parents freak out, right? As soon as those years, the 15, 16-year-old, those years come, parents kind of get a little anxious, because it's like, oh no, I have to let them move an operating vehicle. And so there's a lot of preparation, right, beforehand. And even then, it's hard to just let go and just completely, but so many parents are willing to give their kids this without any monitoring at all, and just kind of like, oh, they begged for it, they whined for it, they asked for it, I don't want them to be upset with me, so here you go, on your 12th, 13th birthday, here you go. Astaghfirullah, big mistake. But aside from that, even exposure, you know, at school. Every single child has a cell phone now. It's like you cannot escape it. So if you don't know the children that you're, you know, the children that your children are hanging around with, and whether or not they have these devices and what they're looking at, this is also a gamble. So that's why it's very important to be very connected from at a very early age and have these conversations openly. Know exactly who your children's best friends are. Know them. Who are they? Who are their parents? Let me talk to them. Take the time to meet them. If you want to invite them over, especially if they're really close friends, invite them to your home, seek them out during, you know, school events. Go engage, you know, who they are. But the company that our children, you know, subhanAllah, this is, I think, probably an area that a lot of parents just don't seem to focus on, and then they wonder why their kids have learned to lie, to deceive, to do all these things when they're like, this is just not what we, you know, we've never allowed this behavior. Where are they learning this from? Likely from their friends. So huge threat. Media and pop culture, obviously, we're bombarded with this everywhere we go, but especially teens, and that's, you know, it's always been that way. I think even our generation, most of us, I'm sure, can relate to the time when we were also, you know, caught up in the pop culture media scene. But we should know who these influencers, this word has become very popular with social media, but it's a term that we should be very familiar with, because there are people who are influencing our children, and they are, you know, whether they're pop icons, celebrities, athletes, whoever they are. If you see that your child has a preoccupation with a certain person, a singer, an actor, an athlete, you should know more about those people than your children, and be well versed in. There's, you know, you can go look up anybody now. Wikipedia is a huge resource. Know about them so that you can, you know, if there's certain behaviors that your kid wants to fall into. Like I had a parent recently talk to me about, you know, their child getting into the goth scene. And, you know, and she was really torn about this because he just completely changed. He went away to school and he's now dressed in all black and wants to wear studs around his ankles and neck and earrings and possibly tattoos. And she's just like, there's nobody in our family that even has anything anywhere near that. What do I do? And so, you know, we talked about that, about the importance of actually understanding that culture, being literate in what it means to be a goth, and not as a, you know, just to be informed, so that when topics come up, what teens do oftentimes is they think that we don't know anything, that we're so disconnected. So we discredit ourselves when we don't understand their world, right? And we don't understand the world that they're exposed to. We discredit ourselves because they're not going to want to listen to anything we have to say if they think that we don't know about their world and about anything that they find important. So it's important to be ahead of them. And this is going back to the very first you know, workshop we did. We talked about the hadith, right? Ala kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati. Every one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for those under your care or your flock. This is a huge, you know, a hadith that we should all be very familiar with, but it's a hadith that really talks about, you know, the role of, you know, the responsibility that we all have. And for parenting, it's ideal because the analogy of a shepherd really makes sense. When you think of a shepherd, they're always ahead of the flock. They protect the flock, right? They know the dangers before the flock has any idea that there's dangers. So we have to, and that's the role that we fill. We have to be the shepherd. So that's part of understanding these things. And so you have to look into where your kids are preoccupied with, the singers or whatever it is that they're caught up. And then internet and social media, same thing. A lot of parents have no clue what their kids are doing online because they themselves don't care about it. I've heard this time and time again. I'm not into social media. I can't stand it. I hate it. Okay, that's good for you. But if your kid is on it and you don't know how Instagram works or about the Explorer page, you know, on Snapchat and Instagram, and that is pretty much, you know, a portal for pornography. I mean, it really is, because what they do, and this is how, you know, this is what we should know about. Instagram and Snapchat, especially Instagram, from what I know, I don't know if things have changed, but whoever your child is following, okay, so let's say your child has friends and they're all, you know, you've vetted them and you think, okay, they're all good, it's all, you know, friends and family, okay? Nobody else. It's a private account. So I've done all my, you know, homework on this and I've given them in their account, they can do Instagram. Okay, that's fine. But did you know that the Explorer page on Instagram, they have, you know, I don't know again how it works, but it's somehow set up where the pages that their friends or other people are following actually can come onto your Explorer page. So it's not just what you're looking at and what you're interested in that you get, that they, you know, put together for you. It's actually what other people are also looking at. And so that's pretty scary if you think about it, because your child might be like, okay, not into certain things, but if it just takes one person that they are following, if they're looking at inappropriate images, those somehow get, you know, again, put onto your child's page. You should know these things. So knowing how social media works and what, you know, how protective measures you can take, what those are as a parent, whether it's in your own home or, you know, or otherwise, but having a handle on that. So these are, you know, how we, again, can get some control. And then societal pressures, expectations to conform, all of that kind of, you know, blends together. But, you know, we do have a lot of expectations when it comes to gender roles, right? Boys are pressured into certain behaviors and things, and girls are pressured in certain things and behaviors. We should be well versed on that, and then be able to have open dialogue with our kids about the dangers of falling into those traps where they feel like, for example, hypermasculinity. You know, a lot of boys are pulled into that, you know, that they have to be aggressive in their behavior, and, you know, it's all about, you know, just proving your manhood in every single way. And if that means being disrespectful to people, especially women, oh well, you know, it's kind of celebrated, unfortunately, in this culture. And then with women, the same, it's all about image, right? Girls, young girls are pressured into putting so much focus on their image. So these things, again, we have to be well versed in, we have to be well read in, so that when we talk about these things with our children, we actually sound like we know what we're talking about, and we're not just, you know, complaining or putting arbitrary rules and without any context. Context is very important for children. I think this comes back to a point that we've made in previous sessions too, about respecting your children, especially when they hit those teen years, respecting the fact that they are individuals, that they're going to, you know, eventually completely separate from you, and that these are the beginning years of that process. But if you talk down to them, if you talk at them, right, you're not establishing, you know, this rapport of, I respect that you have your own mind, and I want to actually help you because I'm still your parent. It's still my job to help you, you know, navigate this world. But if you don't have that rapport of respect and you just speak down to your kids, and, you know, the authoritarian model, you know, there's a difference. Authoritative and authoritarian models of parenting are very, very different. Authoritarian is where it's just like, I'm going to give you the rules and you're just going to listen and obey. And, you know, we'll talk about this, about how dangerous that is when you are someone who just demands respect all the time, and that's your tone and that's the way you parent, versus authoritative, which is commanding respect, right? You actually know what you're talking about. You speak from a place of authority, you know, and knowledge and wisdom, and you impart that onto your child. That's more ideal, and that's more the Islamic model. Did you have your hand raised, brother? I'm sorry. Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 No, Jazakallah khairan. That's right. Very valuable advice, and I agree with everything. I think, you know, yes, in addition to putting certain apps, like I think there's Net Nanny, there's other ones that don't come to mind right away, but there's a website that you can go to. I think it's called carefulparent.com, and that kind of gives you all these different tools, and it gives you some insight on how to, again, take protective measures for your children when it comes to devices and other things as well. But I agree 100%. And that, you know, being proactive, we talked about that too in previous sessions. Being parenting, if it's passive, you're just going to do what was done to you and kind of not really put much effort into it. But innovative and proactive parenting is actually thinking ahead. So the brother's idea about actually using, if you're going to allow your child, your teen, to have a social media account, to actually help them follow individuals that are good examples, and there are, mashallah. I don't like to make sweeping generalizations about anything, and so this isn't a total thing against social media. I myself am on social media, so it would be hypocritical for me to say that. But there are positive people and influencers on social media that are doing a lot of great work. So if you can help your child identify those people and then help them learn how to follow those people, then obviously you're protecting them. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Exactly. Mm-hmm. Right. Agree 100%. Right. And I think I think this question came up yesterday too. I think the answer to that is being proactive. You cannot wait for your child to go and be around cousins and friends, and then they come running to you and go, "Mommy, mommy, can I have this device?" You have to establish that from the beginning. You are never going to get a device until you are whatever age you have. Because if the child knows that ahead of time, then they're not going to come to you, start whining and complaining for it. It's only when they think, ooh, I can maybe negotiate this because so and so has it. And children learn over time how to manipulate us emotionally in their own ways, and they'll wait when we're in certain situations or states to do that. But I think establishing rules ahead of time can remedy that. And I'll use my own example. And with my children, I have 10 and 7-year-old. And alhamdulillah, from a very early age, I set limits on media and social media, devices particular. They do not ask for it. Alhamdulillah wa shukrullah. And it actually leads into the next part of the discussion. But why? Because I let them know very clearly, our house, our rules. I don't care what anyone else is doing, even your first cousins, even the people that are closest to you and you consider them like siblings. That's not our house. That's not our rules. Our rules say limits on all devices, all screen time, and especially with your owning a device. That's not even up for discussion. And when this is authoritative parenting, you're letting your children know with authority that discussion isn't open, and don't even bring it up, so that it's not, you don't have to wait for the nafs to respond, because that's what happens when they see their friends doing something and they think everybody else is doing it. That is a very nafsi reaction, because it's like, I want. I want it, I have to have it. But you set the limit right away, early, that don't even, just basically suppress that nafs, because it ain't going to happen, then khalas, that's not a battle, inshallah, that you should have to fight. So, for example, we talked about, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Self-regulation. This is one of the ways that we can help our children. What is self-regulation? First of all, we have to understand this term, all of us, for ourselves, and then also for our children. Self-regulation, we'll go ahead and read it, is the ability to manage your emotions and behavior in accordance with the demands of the situation. It includes being able to resist highly emotional reactions to upsetting stimuli, to calm yourself down when you get upset, to adjust to a change in expectations, and to handle frustration without an outburst. It is a set of skills that enables children, as they mature, to direct their own behavior towards a goal despite the unpredictability of the world and our own feelings, okay? This is our objective. All of us, we should all be working towards this process of self-regulation. But as parents, we should especially be teaching our children how to self-regulate. And this is why, as was mentioned in previous sessions, when you tailor parenting per child, you will do this effectively. One-size-fits model of parenting doesn't work, okay? Every child is unique. Every child is special. They were created with a certain disposition, with certain temperament. And as parents, we have to, in a multi-child household, learn how to read our children and how to communicate effectively with them, and to be able to take the time to teach them this skill set. And that's why knowing your child's temperament is a core aspect of self-regulation, which is explained here. Because temperament, as we discussed in previous sessions, is measured by how reactive you are and how long your reaction, the duration of your reaction. Okay, those are the simple, it's a simple way of explaining what your temperament is. So when it comes to emotional dysregulation, when you're not self-regulated, what does it look like? For some kids, it's instantaneous. Okay, these are highly reactive children who whine, who fight, who get really upset, angry, start maybe punching walls. I mean, you have kids who exhibit really, really, physically kind of scary and intimidating reactions because they've never learned the skill set. And then parents, what happens to the parent? You know, if you feel like, oh my God, my child's out of control, and all it takes is to quickly give them what they want to calm them down, this is how they win, right? And it happens to parents all the time. It's probably one of the things I've seen the most, of parents acquiescing and capitulating to a child's temper tantrum. And I'm not talking toddlers. I'm talking like, adolescents or even teens. They learn this behavior. And because they, are emotionally kind of unstable and unhinged, the parent thinks, oh my God, I've done something wrong and I have to fix it. And then the fixing is giving them what they want, which does not help them at all. It actually increases the problem for them later down the line. So we have to know that's not a solution. But for other kids, it might be a buildup where they are, they shut down. And we see this also with some kids who feel like they aren't getting what they want from their parents. They learn to withdraw. And so it's not an immediate emotional reaction, but it's kind of like a pulling away from the parents. And some parents feel also the same paranoia and anxiety over that. Like, oh my God, my child's pulling away. They're not talking to me as much. They're not doing this as much. And so the same response, I better just give them what they want because I want my friend back. I want the jokey child that I had back. But this is all a result of not teaching our children how to self-regulate. So here's a quote from the Child and Mind Institute. A child's innate capacities for self-regulation are temperament and personality based. Okay, some babies, and he is talking specifically about infants, have trouble self-soothing. He adds, and gets very distressed when you're trying to bathe them or put clothes on them. Those kids may be more likely to experience trouble with emotional self-regulation when they're older. It's just it starts so early. If we don't look at our children's temperaments from even that stage, and I know, well, it's just an infant, don't all babies cry? You'll see temperaments in the same household, right? You'll see parents who go, oh yeah, this child was so easy, so, oh my God, mashallah, had no problems, and then this one was like this, feisty and difficult. Even twins can exhibit total different temperaments, and so it's so important to understand your child's temperaments. In previous sessions, we explained the importance of studying these things. That God gave you, and that's a great book that really will help you in yourself. First of all, everything that we discuss here, I always encourage parents to start on themselves, and then to look at your spouses and your children, but to study this and then to realize that there are ways to help your children to control themselves in your absence. Honestly should be our objective. All of us, this is what we should want, that when we're not around, that we've done the job, that where our children, alhamdulillah, can self-regulate. And I'll go back to my previous example, children, because we've had this media, or I'm sorry, devices over and over again, they know now, alhamdulillah, when they have reached. In our household, we have a rule. Devices are only in certain situations. Long road trip or somewhere, we'll allow that. And the other time is on Yom al-Jum'ah, and it's for a limited time. Day, and we try to give treats to our children and make positive associations for them. And we know exactly what they're going to do. They usually play, soccer games or the times where they devices. Now, when they have on Friday, this past Friday, my children got to play, with their devices, and then I had mentioned something. Forgetting that they had already played with their devices, I mentioned them watching something later with their dad. And then my eldest, he himself, this was his response. He's like, Mommy, I think that's going to be too much screen time. This is self-regulation. I thinking about having already played games. He himself realized that I don't want to go over my limit. And alhamdulillah, I was like, you know, but that's the objective. Learn how to do these on their own. By modeling, being consistent, and also, like I said, being really well versed in their temperaments and knowing to speak to them individually instead of just, you know, randomly giving out rules to everybody and not really making those connections, making sure they understand why. Like when it comes to social media, a huge thing that we can all do is just watch those documentaries. I did that documentary on CBS recently that talked about how affect the brains of children. I watched that whole thing with my children, and wallahi, my youngest, who's 7 years old, goes, I don't want a phone. This was his answer to watching that video, because he himself understood the deleterious effects of social media and devices on their brain. And he's like, I don't want to have that problem. I don't want to have a problem where my brain doesn't work right and I have addictive behaviors. I mean, there was a quote from one psychologist that said, giving your child a device is akin to giving them a gram of cocaine. I mean, that's the effect that it has on our brains. So when you watch your children and not just watch them and then go repeat them, watch with them, because they'll see that you're not just making things up to be difficult, right? Or that you're just withholding something they really love, but you're actually trying to protect them. So I think we have to respect children can understand these things, give them the benefit of the doubt more than, yes, even a 6, 7-year-old can understand the dangerous if you take the time to respect their intelligence and explain it to them. No. So that model of parenting just is not effective anymore. So now, going back to the previous list about dangers, again, we're just doing a review for those of you who about last session, what we talked about. We talked about the dangers and threats that we all have to kind of anticipate as parents. Among those, devices and social media, but also just being really clear about shaitan and how he works, what his powers are, quote unquote. You know, the fact that when we say he whispers, what does that mean? You know, children, especially when they're young, you know, they might not understand that it's not a physical whisper into their ear, but it's more an inspiration into a thought, you know, that's embedded into their mind, you know, out of nowhere. Sometimes you get a negative thought. Those are types of things to do. And then that he compels us towards wrong action. He wants us to miss the mark. He wants us to sin. He wants us to fall and falter. He wants us to disobey. He wants us to do every bad thing. Being very clear that anytime those negative thoughts come, that they come from him, he angers, and he entices us to illicit behavior. And that his signature, as we mentioned earlier, is to progressively worsen us, to make us worse, and ruin us. That's really what he wants to do. So he's going to inspire us to do worse than anything before. And so that's clear about shaitan. And now when it comes to nafs, clear about how the nafs works and also the weaknesses of the human nafs. So we focus specifically on knowing the diseases of the heart. This is very important. I highly encourage you to get the book that Sheikh Hamza translated, Madharat al-Qulub, and he discusses about 27 or 28 diseases in there. He mentions them, and you know, it's all, you know, the remedies are there. But this would be a great text to study as a family. Okay, again, and you can start this when your children are young in the age-appropriate ways. And mashallah, I believe the Ghazali Project, Fons Vitae has a website, you know, they have a series called the Ghazali Project, and it's all to introduce these topics of the heart and the purification of the heart to young children. This is the kind of stuff we should be, you know, encouraging our children to learn and to really be well versed in before we get them caught up in all the other stuff that they eventually will learn. You know, I know a lot of parents freak out. I had a parent yesterday come up to me afterwards, after the parenting workshop I did, and he was like, you know, I don't allow my children to have any devices or screens or anything. And him and his wife, I think they differ in opinion, because his wife is worried. She thinks that they're going to fall behind. So she's telling him, but I want them to learn how to type and to be really good on the computer. And, you know, and you see all these coding classes that are forced down on children. Everybody's so worried about coding and STEM and all that. And yeah, they're going to get it eventually. But if your kids, if you're spending thousands of dollars putting them in specialized classes to do all of that techie stuff and to just get them academically ahead, but they've never learned this, I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're literally setting them up to fail eventually. And so we have to be, again, go back to that shepherd model and go, there's too many dangers and threats out there, but if I can get them to know themselves really well, to seek, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have that strong relationship with Him, when I'm not there, I don't have to be as paranoid and worried about them. But if I've done all the other preparatory work and got them to excel in every other area, but then spiritually they're really behind, then what good is that going to do them? What good is that going to do them? They might best jobs out there and make a lot of money, but spiritually, where are they going to be at, right? So our job has to be to focus on this. So it's really important to study with your children. And there's other ones, content of character, and I'm sure, we go through a long list, but these are things that we can do as parents, preventative measures, proactive. And questions about this? I'm sorry about the mic that keeps. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, 100%. You have got to be consistent with your parenting, and both, mother and father have to be on the same page. So these discussions, you can't have them in front of the children, or you're arguing back and forth, which unfortunately sometimes parents do. Well, I said so. No, it's you're undermining your authority completely when you do that. You have to be ahead of these things, and that's why I really applaud people who are single and kind of, maybe newly married, who are all ahead and actually proactively taking classes like this, or there's much other resources too, but they're doing the work because they recognize I have to do this before I have children. I can't wait till I have a child and then I see behavior that I'm not happy about and then I try to fix it. I have to be well versed in this. Parent is away or not present, you see a difference in behavior. So this is what unfortunately we inculcate when we're focusing so much on the, on just, again, that authoritarian model, and we're just telling them what to do all the time. It's not effective. So do as I say, not as I do is not effective. It's literally not effective. It's actually, I think, one of the worst things you can do for your relationship with your child, because the child will eventually have no respect for you. And I've seen it. I've seen teens who they have zero respect for their parents because their parents all their lives have been telling them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, but then they're doing the same, the behaviors or worse. So you have to model correct behavior. And if you do that sincerely and you really want your children, the best for your children, they will inshallah follow along. Just kind of like the analogy of like a duck. You see the mama duck, with her little chicks following everywhere she goes, because she's, very clear in her path, and she's, directing them the proper way. But if you're all over the place, going this way and that way and this way and that way, those, your little chicks are going to do the same. They're going to follow you, they're going to exhibit the same sort of erratic behavior because you're not clear in your path. So we have to, again, start back with ourselves and realize what it means to be an effective leader. So here we've identified the 5 characteristics of an effective leader. Number 1, strong communication. Okay. Then passion and commitment. Okay. So you have to be passionate about, and committed to everything we're talking about. You can't just, kind of get, exhausted after, a few efforts and just kind of give up. And then positivity, be positive in your attitude with your children, with yourself, with everything that you take on. And innovative, you have to be innovative. So innovative, and when it comes to really going back to what I was saying earlier, as far as, looking at your children as being unique, being innovative in how you deal with your children. Every child is going to require a different way of communication. So some kids, you might need to do bonding experiences with them, where you actually take them out on special excursions, just you and them, and you do a lot of physical, things where they really feel like you're focusing your attention on them. Other kids might just need, more affection, physical affection. And so this is where knowing things like the love languages can really be helpful, and studying those with your family, because we all might know it for our spouses and our significant others, but you have to know it for your entire family. Every child has a different love language. Some really appreciate gifts and feel really special when you do things for them, or when you offer to help them in certain things. So you have to know those things, but that's where being innovative in your parenting comes through, is that you're not just doing a one-size-fits-all model. And then collaboration is really looking again to mentors, maybe amongst your friends and family, parents who have already kind of been through phases that you're about to go through. Like Zishan here, he's in our community, him and his wife Hannah. People should know them, mashallah. They're pillars in the community, and they've done a lot in terms of this, of offering great counsel to couples and families about parenting. But we should be able to identify people in our community that we can go to for help. We have a Khalil Center, we have, mashallah, scholars we're very, very privileged here in the Bay Area. So we have to know who can we seek out when comes, but I highly encourage people to be proactive. Don't wait for problems to arise and then figure out what to do. Think about everything. I think about all the scenarios that could potentially go wrong, and you have to be really willing, like, what would I do if this happens or that happens? Know who you're going to reach out to in those situations. But this is what, again, if you have these qualities, inshallah, then we're on the right track. So I wanted to today talk about something that is really tied into this. How many of you have heard about this term called the growth mindset? Okay, good. So in education now, we're seeing this a lot. Okay, this concept being taught to children. I did a workshop recently on this for parents and educators about this term and what it means. But in doing it, I realized, subhanAllah, this is something parents need to hear, and honestly, every individual needs to hear. Because we are all, there's a lot of, Islamic, there's a connection here, with principles of our faith in this, and we'll get to that. But I feel like if we understand how, and it ties back to temperament and really knowing yourself well, which is a constant theme that we've been talking about. But if you really have a solid understanding of what your mindset is, and if it's impeding your ability to effectively parent, then it's going to help you. Because a lot of parents, I think, they're not aware of how fixed some of their thoughts are. So let's just get into what this whole term means for those who've never heard of it. So the growth mindset is, sorry, wrong slide. Let me see here. There we go. You can see that. So it's a concept that was created by Carol Dweck, and she's a psychologist, and she basically wrote a book called The Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. And she identified a mindset as a self-perception or self-theory that people hold about themselves. Okay, so this can apply to anything. It can apply to your intelligence, okay? So being intelligent or unintelligent, being generous, being, not generous. There's certain qualities that if you accept about yourself, you start to believe that this is just who you are at your core. Even spiritually speaking, people do this. I'm just not very strong spiritually. And so they kind of give up, right? And we see this happening a lot, where people become very stagnant in their spiritual practice because they don't think that they have the potential to do better. They kind of get locked into this mindset that this is just who I am. I'm lazy. I'm not really strong. I can't, or when you're learning, let's say Quran or Arabic or anything, I'm not good at languages. It's hard for me. So what do? You basically get locked into thinking that you can't grow, right? A lot of people around us walking around like this, thinking that they're just stunted where they are. This is just how Allah created me, and I can't move past this. And so imagine if that's your mindset, how it's going to affect not only your relationship, your spiritual health, right, but your relationships with other people, because you kind of get locked into thinking. So this self-theory, right, this perception. And then people can be aware or unaware. So a lot of times people might be aware of their mindsets. A lot of times they're not. So let's look at what a fixed mindset is versus a growth mindset, okay? A fixed mindset are people who basically believe that their basic qualities like intelligence or talent are simply fixed traits. They spend their time documenting their intelligence or talent instead of developing them. They also believe that talent alone creates success without effort. How many people think maybe they were led to believe that for most of their lives, that by being compared to other family members, sometimes as children, some of our parents did that a lot, even either it was within the same household or maybe, extended family members. A lot of kids in our generation, I know from just speaking to people, we got compared a lot, right? And so did you ever think that some people were just naturally born talented, right? How many people have kind of felt that way, or maybe still do, right? Right? But some people, let's say, for example, athletic ability, right? Isn't there this perception that some people are just naturally athletic, right? Versus people who aren't? Or artistic ability, right? Some people are just naturally artistic versus artistic. So I remember, I don't know if you've read the book by Malcolm Gladwell. I always forget the name of it, subhanAllah. Outliers. How many of you have read this book? It's an excellent book. I highly recommend you to read it, and I recommend you to read it as a family, because this book talks about kind of, it breaks down this whole myth that people are just born, exceptional. That actually it's effort, right? That it's putting a lot of sincerity in your action, which goes back to the Islamic model of ihsan and itqan. When we do things with sincerity and we do things deliberately and we do things diligently and we do things with that right intention, the tawfiq comes not inherently. Where does tawfiq come from? Where does it come from? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People aren't just born with, privilege and talent. Allah, yes, He distributes these things to whoever seeks it, right? To whoever He wills, first of all, but also to those who seek it. And that's why you have, mashallah, amazing stories of people in their 90s who have completed hifz of Quran. When we would think that's impossible because, my memory's bad. I have a bad memory. I have mommy brain. I mean, I've been caught saying that, my memory really plummeted after kids, But if you believe that and you get locked into this fixed mindset, guess what? Next time a program comes around to teach hifth or to teach a particular subject that maybe you have an interest in, shaitan's going to come and, basically thwart you from even thinking about it, right? You're never going to do it. Why even bother? You can't do it. You're 40 plus, you're 50 plus, you're 30 plus. Your time is, you hit your prime early, right? You're over your prime. This is a fixed mindset, right? But so many people get caught up in that. So if you believe that your talents are either born gifted or not, then khalas, give up. You're not going to try anything. A lot of people are walking around like that. But this book, he basically goes through history and pulls out select, individuals that mastered whatever field they were in, whether it was music or, he talks about like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. And I remember Bill Gates kind of stuck out to me because I said, subhanAllah, I mean, that's just clear, planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the supercomputer came about, I guess there was just a few of them, right, in the world, in the country or in the world possibly. But he just happened to live school in the city where they had one in the university that he was at. All the other people who were interested in computer science at that time, because it was kind of exciting, this new concept of a computer science. He, like all the other students, they were given access to this computer, but they had to pay for it. So they had these cards that they had to use, and they would get charged every time they used to get access to the computer. Guess what happened to his card? There was a glitch with his card, so he didn't have to pay. So he got to go like 10 times, maybe 100 times, all the other kids at his age who had the same passion. That opened up all the opportunity in the world for him. He learned and he mastered, he got really ahead of it. And then next thing you know, he's Bill Gates, right? But this is how, we believe that Allah is the one who's in charge of these things, and He gave him that opportunity. But the point is when we think of someone like Bill Gates, a lot of people think, well, he's just a genius. He just ahead of us in so many ways. He had privilege. He also had the determination, though, right? The drive. He was going every day. He was doing it. So anyhow, just to summarize, Gladwell says that there's a magic number. He says if you can commit yourself to doing something 10,000 hours, you will be a master of that, whatever it is. That's how much it takes. Put the effort in, 10,000 hours. So you see all these athletes and all these singers and all these people who held at their specific talent, it's because, yeah, they've been practicing since they were 5, 6, 7, 8, gymnasts, whatever they are, soccer players. They've been doing it for so long that the numbers add up. They've put in that time. So the point is it kind of, again, debunks this whole idea that talent is just inherited. But if you are locked into this mindset, you don't grow, and you likely aren't going to see potential growth in your children. So you have parents who sometimes just believe what they believe about their children. Oh, he's not very good at this, good at that. And then they prevent growth with their children because of they're just projecting their mindset onto their children. It's sad, it's tragic, because we don't encourage our children into things for whatever reason, but we'll talk. Do you have a question? Yeah, please. Mm-hmm. Right. It is. Right. Right. Well, we're talking, this is, if it comes down to something you're passionate about, right, then I think you have to zone in on one thing particular. Obviously, all these people aren't doing this for everything that they have an interest in. So it's really a matter of honing in on what your particular passion or interest is in, and then doing that type of dedication. It's going to take time. But I think if we're trying to apply it to all the different areas and interests that we have, yeah, that's where it's going to be very difficult to do, because there's just simply not enough time to do that. So I think this is, again, the importance of really being in touch with yourself and knowing yourself well, knowing your temperament, knowing how, the gifts that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has facilitated for you, and seeing, can I maybe, do, excel at this? For example, you see, I used to teach Quran, and I would have, mashallah, students. There was one particular student who blew my mind. He just was naturally very good at memorization. We would work on, he was a first grader. We would work on, the shorter surahs of Juz Amma, and I would do 2 or 3 ayahs with, he'd come back the next day, I'm not joking, have the entire surah memorized and the surah after it. So I told his parents, I said, this is a child that most likely should be like in a HIFS program, because he's already displaying this natural gift for memorization. And if he has a love for it, he really enjoyed doing it. So it wasn't that they were forcing him. I didn't expect that as his teacher, but I could just see, mashallah, he had a gift. And I believe he did go on to do HIFS. So sometimes, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates certain things for certain people. And that's where, again, being in touch with those things. But to get into this locked mindset where you are who you are and there's really no potential to change, it can be, it can prevent us from growth. And that's why we have to really revisit that and make sure that we're not preventing that for ourselves or for our families. So a growth mindset, which would be the opposite of a fixed mindset, actually believes that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. One area, for example, that I can speak about is writing. Alhamdulillah, and I've written for a long time. I remember writing poetry when I was in, elementary school, and I just wrote a lot, So I used to have journals, and I would write cards for my friends, and I'd write. But I get this from a lot of people that I'm not a writer. I can't write. I'm not a writer. I can't write. I don't know how you do it. How do you do it? And I'm like, well, I think everybody can write. I think you just have to want to do it. But a lot of people, just don't want to. So over the years, when I was in high school especially, a lot of people would ask me to do their, writing assignments for them because I can't do it. Can you help me out? Can you fill this out for me? And, sometimes, it happened even later than that. But people would ask me to do writing assignments for them because I'm not a writer. So, this is again an example of getting locked into this thinking. But actually, I think you can. You just have to take some classes, take some creative writing classes or public speaking. People think, oh my God, it's the biggest fear ever. No public speaker has ever just walked up on stage and just did an amazing job. It's not how it works. You have anxiety because, yeah, it's terrifying to stand. But the more you do it, guess what? Like anything, you're going to get better at it. So a lot of people are so afraid and they just think, nope, that's not for me. Totally fixed mindset. Okay, so can you have something other than a fixed or growth mindset? According to one psychologist, his name is James Anderson. He actually took Carol Dweck's, mindset mindsets, and he said there's actually more potential because, and he calls it the mindset continuum. Okay, so we can actually have different mindsets. So let's look at this. And this is really small. Don't worry, I'm going to go through each one, but I just wanted you to get the full picture of what this measures. The mindset continuum measures a few different things, and just to see how your mindset can really affect your life. It can affect your worldview, challenges, how you face challenges, how you encounter difficult challenges and obstacles, the effort that you put, how you take feedback, how you perceive the success of people, making mistakes, how you react to when you make a mistake, how you're offered help and support. So again, we're going to examine this a little bit more in depth. So if you look at the continuum, you have fixed and you have high growth, and then in between you have low growth, mixed, and growth. Okay, so understanding where you are in the continuum is very important. You have a very fixed mindset, which a lot of people do, especially parents and our grandparents' generation. You can't sometimes to do anything, right? They're like, I'm not doing it, I'm not having it, because it's natural as you just kind of, get very fixed in who you are, and you don't want to explore and try new things, and it's just like, nope, I don't want to do it. It's not for me. So a lot of people will see that in people who are older, but it actually can start a lot earlier. So if you have a fixed mindset, you just see yourself as unchanging and unchangeable. Like, I'm not going to change. This is who I am. And sometimes this is who I am. Take it or leave it. We hear this. Take it or leave it. I'm not going to change. My bad habits are just part of me. Is this part of, would you think this would be acceptable from the Islamic perspective? Right? You have bad habits, and I've seen this with couples counseling. One or two are just kind of done. They're sick and tired of having to defend their behavior. So they just kind of get to the point where it's like, I am who I am. They can take it or leave it. But from a spiritual perspective, this is totally incorrect, because our whole objective on earth is to develop, to be better. So we don't accept, just stagnation and this is just where I am at. No, we have to have a growth mindset, right, in everything. But and so you can, again, there's variation. You should see for yourself where you are in this continuum. If you have a low growth, then there might be certain things that you think, okay, I can, develop, or, but it's very limited. A mixed mindset is there's a number of things that you're willing to do, and other things absolutely not. So you can again see it's just gradually getting more and more expansive as you go into the continuum. And this applies to everything. Challenges. If you're a fixed mindset, you avoid challenges altogether. You're not going to, and I've heard people say this, if I know I'm not going to succeed at doing it, I won't even try. But does that logically make sense? How can you know if you're going to succeed at anything if you don't try, right? But because in their minds they don't think they can succeed at something, what's the point? I'm not even going to try. So they'll just, that's it. There's no even potential to get them to, to open their mind. And then if you have a high growth mindset, you embrace challenges. You actually are like, hey, if someone tells me I can't do something, I am going to prove them wrong, excuse me, right? I'm going to prove them wrong. So this is what a growth mindset has. It's like, I don't think so. You tell me, that I'm not good enough, or I don't have this talent, or I don't have that talent. I'll prove you wrong. So again, you look at challenges not as something to be afraid of. Encountering difficulties and obstacles. If you have a difficult situation that you're in, if you have a fixed mindset, you give up easily, quickly. And I've seen this, let's say, again, with marriages. You have some people who throw in the towel very early. They're just like, I'm done. They don't want to consider, what, maybe this is an opportunity for your growth. Maybe you can, develop, seek help, get some, marriage counseling. Nope, I'm just done. And that's where you get people who, throw out the word divorce and the marriage is over because they gave up. It wasn't the dream. It wasn't the fantasy that I wanted. I'm done. I'm out. And then you have a growth mindset that says, nope, we are going to push past. We made a commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever it is, we're going to keep pushing until we get to that place, right? And you do your best. And not to say that every marriage has to last. You're trying, and you don't feel this need to say, quitting because it's too difficult. Effort, okay? So for a fixed mindset, effort is associated with failure, okay? So you kind of, your effort measures how much you think, again, if you're going to fail or not. You put in that type of effort. Whereas if you have a high growth mindset, it's a path to mastery. So you try harder because, like, I'm working really hard at this. I know I'm going to get it. Go back to school, take a class, or you learn a skill set. You're not intimidated. You really see the effort as a path to something great. Criticism. If you have a fixed mindset, you ignore feedback and criticism. So someone could tell you over and over again that you have a bad habit with something, that you have a problem in a particular area, but you're just, it literally in one ear and out the other. You don't hear it. You don't even pay any attention to it. You give it no value whatsoever. And we know people like this, people who will never change because they've heard it from family, from friends, that they have certain qualities, but for whatever reason, they're just not having it. And it's likely because, again, they have that fixed mindset. Whereas if you have a high growth mindset, subhanAllah, you request feedback, critical feedback. You want people to tell you if you're doing something successfully or not. Or, you ask for that. Like, what do you think? Do you think this is good or not? Do you think I should change on it? Whatever it is. But this is, again, you're constantly wanting to better yourself. So feedback doesn't, make you feel bad. You don't, put it back on the other person. You actually welcome feedback. And then the success of others. So if you have a fixed mindset, you're likely to be someone who is threatened by the success of other people. You don't like that other people are better than you at something, or they're succeeding financially, or their children maybe have more things that you wish your kids had. Jealousy. There's an envy. So do you see how this all reflects our spiritual. Your mindset very much reflects where you are spiritually, but a lot of people don't pay attention to how these things manifest, right? So again, if you feel threatened by the success of other people, you have to really ask yourself where you are in this. And then when you have a high growth mindset, you seek out masters and experts. You're actually like, hey, you're better at this than me. I want to learn from you. I don't look at you like as a threat. I actually want to benefit from you. Okay? So again, it's something that because you're constantly looking at growth and bettering yourself, so your mindset is in line with that. And then the last two is making mistakes. If you have a fixed mindset, you hide or ignore your mistakes. So if you're someone who, you just don't talk about anything you did wrong, and you're just always like, covering up, and you don't apologize for things when you do wrong things. I mean, I've seen this with parents especially and their children. It's a big mistake not to apologize to your children. If you make mistakes in the way that in something, and you yell, you scream, you do something wrong in front of your parents, children, you should absolutely apologize. But a lot of parents want to act like, nope, I don't make mistakes. They never. I've heard parents literally say, I never apologize. Just don't do it. Why should I? Again, fixed mindset. But a high growth mindset, you realize that mistakes are actually opportunities to learn. There's a learning potential there. So you want to grow and you want to expand. You don't look at them as being these, blights on who you are that you have to hide and cover, but rather like, okay, I made a mistake, but pick up and get better. And that's very much, again, in line with the Islamic model. And then when you're offered help, there's people who clearly, their house is, they won't take help. And I've unfortunately heard this from a lot of couples, where one really, really wants help, and then the spouse is refusing. I refuse. I will never. I've heard this. I will never go to therapy, ever. I'll never go to therapy. Their marriage is falling apart. They're literally on the verge of divorce. But this is the kind of I'm never going to, so offering of help is just shut out, right? They turn it down. And if you have a growth mindset, you recognize, yes, when I have problems, I need to seek out help. Take all this, and I know it's a lot of information. I apologize if it's hard to see the slides, but evaluate where you are on this continuum. Are you low growth, fixed? Where are you? High growth, low growth? Where are you? and in relation to all this. And then ask yourself, how does this affect my parenting, right? Because if I'm stuck in my ways, am I teaching my children to be stuck in their ways? Am I inhibiting their growth, right? Whereas if you have a high growth and you have a high desire for success, inshallah, the opposite will happen. Your children will learn from that as well. So can my change? Yes, absolutely. Research on brain plasticity, how connectivity between neurons can change with experience. So when we, with practice, okay, going back to what we said earlier, and determination, you can actually change your mindset with good strategies, asking questions, practicing, following good nutrition, sleep habits. So this is important, again, for you to know and also for your children, okay? And this is an example that I shared with the teachers, but I thought it was helpful for us too, that, you know, in a study with 7th graders at an inner city New York school, students were divided into 2 groups for a workshop on the brain and study skills. So half of the students, the control group, were taught about the stages of memory. Okay, so that was their workshop. They just talked about memory. The other half received training in the growth mindset, how the brain grows with learning to make you smarter, and how to apply the idea for their schoolwork. Now, the students who had the growth mindset workshop, they actually, you know, they did 3 times as better, or 3 times as many students in the growth mindset group showed an increase in effort and motivation compared with the control group. And after the training, the control group continued to show declining grades, but the growth mindset group showed a clear rebound in their grades. So who were sitting in this growth mindset workshop, just by hearing the fact that they can get better in their studies, they were given hope. They were given that, you know, positive reinforcement that all of them have the potential to get better. They actually did better. So do you see the importance of relaying this positive energy, relaying that, you know, and relaying hope? It's very important that we do that for each other, because the opposite of that is shaitan. Shaitan, he works by taking away hope. He works by destroying our spirits, getting us depressed, getting us to think that we're doomed, okay? That we're just, you know, we have bad luck. We're cursed. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many people think that somebody in another country did, you know, nazar and ayn on the family, and now their children are experiencing that, and their marriages are suffering because of that. All fixed mindset stuff. That's all waswasa from shaitan, because he's literally robbed you of hope. So now, and I literally get calls, panic calls, like, is there someone here in the local area that can do taweez, or can you do ruqya? I could do this because I really think this is happening. I'm like, well, you know, if that's how you're gonna, then you're literally stuck in that, and that's exactly what shaitan wants from you, because now you're just in a cycle of sadness, hopelessness, and there's zero growth, and it's gonna bleed into every member of your household when you're like that. And that's what's happening in our community. So growth mindset, you know, again, this is just simple stuff, but you're just changing your mindset. You're changing the way you look at the world. You're literally not getting locked into thinking of yourself as any fixed thing, but rather as something that's changeable, that can improve. Your circumstances can improve. If you have health issues, you know, I posted this earlier on Facebook, but I highly please, last night I watched this documentary. If you have Netflix, it's called Heal. It is one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. I was like, the whole time, like, oh my God, that's like, it's so Islamic, everything they're saying. This documentary shows you the power of the mind, and how people can heal from serious chronic illness and disease just by positive thinking, which is completely in line with Islam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? I am in the opinion of my servant, right? So if you have a growth mindset, if you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change anybody's circumstances, right, and your circumstance, and you sincerely believe that, it's not just words that you say because they're the right things to say, but in your heart of hearts, you truly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the potential to change your circumstance, He will prove that. He will prove you correct. The opposite is true. If you think something's wrong with you, you're flawed, you're not good enough, or you're just, again, doomed to suffer, that's what you're going to see. This is a hadith. So it's very clear how powerful, having the correct mindset is when it comes to our own spiritual and mental well-being and our spiritual health and our families' spiritual well-being and spiritual health, right? Just some, basic for parents on how they can change the way that they speak to their children to encourage growth mindset. So you don't praise your children you praise them for effort, for strategies, progress, hard work, persistence. You don't praise being smart, being born gifted, talented, having fixed abilities, not mistakes. So it's just kind of, little tweaks in the way that we talk to our children that will help them, encourage them to have a growth mindset. Because if you focus on your children, being the effort that they put into something, this is what encourages them to continue to put to heart. But if you just think, oh, see, you're so smart, you're so good, you do this, and then you're doing a lot of comparison between your kids, it's going to break down the confidence of one or more child. Trust me, it happens all the time to children. And especially when you look at studies on birth, right? We've talked about this before. There's a huge thing that parenting, we have to look at what happens when we are constantly praising our eldest because they're high achievers, overachievers. And why are they? The eldest in our families are usually all the attention, right? They didn't have to compete for attention. They got all the best of everything. They didn't have hand-me-downs. They got all the best opportunities. We were present. We were excited. It's the first grandchild. Then, oh my God, they're like the golden child. And so all of that helps them to continue to excel even into adulthood. Child who's completely ignored and lost. I was one. I know. They're lost in the mix. There's so many that you get kind of just like, who are you? Nobody cares about your needs. Nobody cares. So how does this affect, relationships? You're going to likely crave babies who get away with everything. And they're just, they get very entitled because mom and dad are too tired and exhausted with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to even care about what 6 is doing or what 3 is doing because it's like we burnt out, right? So, but you walk into your relationships with that mindset, you're going to end up having, or with any of these mindsets, there's going to cause issues there. But we can do a lot when it comes to preventing these things from happening to our children by just being more aware of how the way we speak to them, the praise that we give them, the attention we give them, their self-confidence. Just to talk about growth mindset a little bit more in Islam, here are some ayahs from how much this is rooted in our faith. Indeed, change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us very clearly, we have to do the work, right? If we want our condition to circumstance to change, it has to start with us. The most beloved actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that are performed consistently, even if they are, Brother mashallah earlier mentioned the importance of that. Everything we do in ourselves, in our worship, our ibadah, all of those things. If you're 2, 3 prayers a day, or you're just like, oh, I'm gonna, skip because we have a wedding to go to. This happens all the time. Sisters especially, I got my makeup on. I can't risk breaking my, clearing my face off and make wudu. I have a wedding to go to. Oh my gosh. Your kids. The prayer is, all about my convenience, right? This is disastrous. It's not consistent. Our lives have to revolve around our prayer. Our very first objective in this world is salah. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, to worship Him. So if you're not consistent with that, but then you get upset at your teenager for not praying, where did he learn it from? Where did she learn it from? We're not waking up for Fajr because nobody told him how important it was. You sure didn't when you decided to just skip a prayer because it wasn't convenient. So this is where consistency really matters, right? Allah, I take refuge in you from anxiety and sorrow, miserliness and cowardice, the burden of debts from being overpowered and from being laziness. We have to make, seek refuge from being, just apathetic. We don't care. lazy and not really put in much effort into anything. This is a big problem, but this is, again, to reinforce this concept, we have it's all in our hands. And then from Ibn Jawzi, I think, is important. To achieve any, according to Ibn Jawzi, radiallahu anh, things, noble himma, motivation, okay, and then the right strategy. So, alhamdulillah that you guys are, mashallah, at least looking into the importance of taking classes like this, because this is, you know, one example. There's, mashallah, many other offerings in our community of how you're proactive and you're looking at strategies and learning and growth. So it's a good sign, mashallah, that you're here, alhamdulillah, and that you're taking from this. And then there's other, mashallah, ayahs as well. If you're, I shall certainly give you increase. Actions are by intentions. When you've taken a decision, put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a lot of that, again, in line with this. And one last thing, or we're almost done. I want to also just remind ourselves of the purpose of Sharia, right? Because we're, alhamdulillah, we're Muslim, we know our faith, but we understand what Sharia, the Islamic law, what it protects, what they are. It's meant to things. Okay, practice of the self, okay, the mind, which is children, right, and the family, and then property. So the fundamental protections include freedom of, again, religion, affirm the sanctity of life, uphold the power of reasoning of the mind, validate the importance of family, and protect the rights of children, and guarantee the security of assets. So for all of us, we have to remember we are going to be held accountable for what we do with our children. The entire, you know, basis of our faith, it guarantees their protection. So that's why it's so important to really remember parenting is an amana. Okay, and we talked about this in the very first session. If we walk into parenting thinking we're entitled to it, okay, that it's an entitlement, that children are just our little minions and extensions of us that we get to boss around and tell what to do because they look like us and they remind us of us, and we can talk to them however we want, and we can tell them to do whatever we want. This is going against the Sharia. They are not ours. They belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He will collect His, you know, amana from us. And how we return our children to Him is going to be the basis of where we stand with Him. So we have to really take it very, very seriously that what we're doing is cultivating souls, inshallah, and we should protect their beautiful hearts so that this ugly world, and that we've given the shield and the tools to protect themselves and protect their hearts. And so that's, again, so important to remember this is all in line with the basis of our faith. And the takeaways that I hope you take from these sessions, this and all the ones before, are just reminders that we've repeated throughout, that parenting, again, is not part of your dream life. If you had a dream of what parenting was going to be like, what your marriage was going to be like, it's not determined by your dream, your good intentions, your actions. What your experience of parenting in has nothing to do with any of those, because we can't control outcomes. There are people who do everything right, but things don't turn out the way they want them to. And submission is saying, okay, Allah, I tried my best. I did the best that I could. If you can say that, then alhamdulillah, your heart, that you did the best you could. But if your children don't turn out exactly the way you want them to, and there's a reason, because maybe you were negligent, maybe you didn't fulfill their rights the way you should have, that's a reason to be worried with your standing. But if you did everything right, outcomes are not up to you. Again, parenting is an amana. Children do not belong to us. A lot of things I just mentioned. And effective parenting starts with the parent's commitment to self-knowledge and growth first. So if we want to be effective as parents, this is the starting ground, not just focusing on children. That'll come. They will follow what we do. Just focusing on controlling them like little, you know, robots, and we just want a controller and someone to tell us, well, how can I make them do that? That's, your intention isn't in the right place. It should be, I want to be better for my children. I want to set the right example. So how can I better myself so that they can be better? That's what we should be doing when we're doing parenting classes. And then effective parents also know when to seek help and aren't for it. So if you can take these away from all these workshops, alhamdulillah, I feel like we've done our job here. We've communicated things effectively. And then these are just some last quotes to end with, or positive messages that we should all think about. If parents want to give their children a gift, the best thing they can do is teach their children to love challenges, be intrigued by mistakes, effort, and keep on learning. That way their children don't have to be slaves of praise. They will have a lifelong way to build and repair their own confidence. And then accept your child as a beautiful and miraculous gift alone from God. See the best in him or her, for he will then see the best. Praise and encourage his positive qualities. Feed his spirit by making sure he knows you love him, flaws and all. He is worthy just as he is. How you see your child expands into how he sees himself. Okay. So alhamdulillah, that was the end of the presentation.